What is up, everyone? What was that?
It always freaks me out because I always get the notification on my phone saying,
as soon as we go live,
before we go live, saying you're live.
Well, we are live. What is up, everyone? Happy Monday. Welcome to Ginger Runner Live episode number 197. Tonight, very excited. Our guest is back. This is his third time on Ginger Runner Live. And it's always great to have him on. He's an awesome coach, athlete, ultra runner. David Roche will be joining us tonight. And we're going to talk specifically about injury prevention, recovery from injury, getting back to the sport after injury. I'm coming off of an injury, even though it might be minor. It was still something I'm like, this is the end of the world. This is the end. But he helped me get through it, and he's helped a number of athletes get through there. So tonight we're very excited to have David join us on the show. Am I forgetting anything? I'm already ready to get into it.
You okay?
Yeah, I'm just speeding through the intro. Thank you for taking the time out tonight, guys. Here we go. Ginger Runner Live begins in 3, 2, 1. Ginger Runner. Yay! What is up, everyone? Welcome to Ginger Runner Live, episode number 197.
We are almost at 200. I'm not going to say what you thought I was going to say.
We are getting up there, though. And we are almost at episode 200. I don't know what we're going to do for it, but I do know that our guest, we have that guest scheduled. And it's the great Ann Trayson.
Yep.
She just happens to be free on the 200th Monday of Ginger Runner Live. And it's my mind is blown. It's going to be a great episode. But before we even get to that, welcome. Welcome to Ginger Runner Live. We are live. If you would like to join us in the chat room, you can do so. Just go to the YouTube page, depending on where you're watching this, because we've had people in the past say that it was, maybe embedded on Facebook or Twitter or that sort of thing.
Yep.
You can actually join the live chat room by just going to the YouTube page, youtube.com/thegingerrunner, and there's a really active community there already in the chat room.
And the community has actually been active. I checked in about 40 minutes ago, and it was already full of people chattering away. So if you guys have questions, as Ethan just said, we are live. So if you have questions for our guest David tonight, just ask them in the chat room. We'll be pulling them throughout the hour.
That's right. Our guest, ultra runner, coach, fast, David Roche. He's back on the show. We've had him on the show a couple of times before. You'll definitely want to go back and watch or listen to those previous episodes with him and his wife Megan Roche, both fantastic athletes. But tonight I wanted to talk I wanted to a bigger breadth of topics around injuries, because I'm coming off of what I thought was going to be a detrimental injury and totally take me off track of my training for Checking Out 50K, which is coming up. But he managed to kind of get me through it. Every injury feels like it's the worst injury. So I wanted to talk specifically about injuries, and he coaches a number of athletes who have gone through just crazy injuries, having to take a year plus off from their sport, running and stuff like that, and we're able to get back into it. So we're going to talk to him about what it's like to be patient, what we need to do to maybe help avoid those injuries, get our minds right when we do get them, if we get them, and how we can get back into the sport if and when they occur. So it's going to be a great conversation tonight. Of course, before we even get into the show, we have some people to thank tonight. All of our Patreon supporters help keep the lights on and mics hot here. 3 in particular. Mr. Brian Sands, who's been a longtime top-tier Patreon supporter, ran his very first marathon last October and signed up for his very first ultra marathon this year. And we've been following his journey, and it's amazing. He's an amazing friend. And
I was going to say, I believe Coach Megan might be Brian's coach now.
That might be true, and we'll even be able to talk to David and Megan maybe about that tonight. Brian Sands probably in the chat room. I believe he is.
Yep.
It's a good episode to watch, Brian. Chris Lee in Hong Kong, also a top-tier Patreon supporter. Chris Lee is in charge of creating the Trailblazer Network there. It's this really great company and organization showcasing all of Hong Kong's beautiful trails that are just minutes outside of the city. He's been a longtime supporter of the Ginger Runner, and he's doing this really cool thing, bringing our videos and our podcasts to the community there, and they're just doing a wonderful thing. So if you're watching or viewing or listening from Hong Kong, or you're visiting Hong Kong in the future, make sure you look up Trailblazer, because the brick and mortar shop is amazing, and Chris has a wealth of knowledge for the local scene there. And finally, Rick Bjarnason, coming to us from cheekymonkeymedia.ca in Canada. He and his team at Cheeky Monkey are in the process of redesigning the Ginger Runner website. Don't go there right now. It's broken.
It's a mess.
It's literally a mess of code. But they are taking my hand and walking me through the process and doing incredible things. I did the Ginger Miss website in December. Super professional team, and we can't thank Rick and his team for being top tier and just supporting everything that we're doing here. And Rick himself is also an ultra runner, training for Sinister 7, Fat Dog 120, like bonkers races.
A lot of gnarly Canadian races.
Yeah, pretty awesome. All right, let's get into this thing. Our guest tonight is just an awesome guy. He's a good friend. He's a coach, an ultra runner. He's been on the show before, as I mentioned. Without further ado, let's just bring the man on. He's been patiently waiting. I'm going to keep talking, actually, just to make him wait. No, I'm totally kidding. Without further ado, Mr. David Roche.
Yay!
Hey, everyone. It's so great to be on. Thanks for having me, too. Every time I'm on, the Ginger Runner Live community is one of the best in the whole world in anything, independent of just running, too. So last time I was on, I found that after it, I was like, I'm known not just as the guy with the dog, I'm also known as the guy that has been on Ginger Runner Live. So thanks to everyone that's listening too. You guys are pretty wonderful.
We agree. The community here is fantastic. We get a lot of new viewers too each week. A lot of people that are like, I've never seen this before. It's fun. So this is a really great community if this is your first time watching. And David is a great guy. David, you can't see it, but the graphic right now on screen is you over here.
It's Kim, behind my head.
It's behind Kim. Kim and I are in the lower right-hand corner. And then the live chat room is to the right. So yes. I want to remind those who are watching live, if for some reason the audio is a little off or the video is off or any of that kind of stuff, let us know, just because this is new stuff for us. This is new tech, and we just want to make sure we get it right. So David, what have you been doing as of late? Are you training for anything right now? Let's just talk a little bit about your running before we get into injury prevention and stuff like that. What's going on with you?
The main thing I've been doing is checking my text messages to make sure, see how your shins do, see how you're feeling, see how your injuries are going. But yeah, I mean, my wife, Coach Megan, and I, basically our lives are pretty much like Groundhog Day, and that's just the way we want it. We wake up, run, coach all day, and watch the Olympics, and then sleep. We'll see what happens in 2 weeks. We'll have to change the Olympics up. We'll have to get a new show. But other than that, that's how things are going. I'm training personally for Way Too Cool coming up, but I'm way more excited for the athletes I have at Way Too Cool, and then Black Canyon this weekend, and Moab, Red Hot, and all these other fun races. And then Brian Sands Ultra, Coach Megan does coach him. So yeah, just really excited. I get, as you can probably tell from things, get really giddy to see what everyone's doing every week.
That's one thing I really just love about ultra coaches in general. Every ultra coach that I get a chance to talk to, David, of course, you and Megan, they're athletes. They're like more excited for their athletes than they are for their own races. And even when they're running their own races, it's about the athletes that they coach that maybe are also running that race. Like their race is like secondary completely to their athletes, which I think is pretty neat. I want to remind everyone who is watching live, if you have questions for David about anything really throughout the show, Kim.
I'm in the chat room as always. There's already been some requests of where's Addie Dog? People are wondering.
She'll make an appearance at the end. Megan,
I was gonna say.
Yeah, Addie is currently waiting for her dinner in the kitchen, and we'll wait till she's got fully satiated.
Let's get into it. So the topic of today, I want to revolve around injury. It's something that I've had a lot of experience running through injuries, ankle sprains, all sorts of inflammation and tendonitis and things on both of my legs. Last year, most of the year, I was suffering from an adductor strain. There's still residual stuff of that. Yeah,
you really haven't been injury-free for over a year.
And it's been frustrating to say the least. I know a lot of our viewers will, at some point, get injured. It might be a minor injury. It could be, an ankle sprain or something like that. So, David, is it common for runners to get injuries, first of all? When they do happen, is it something that we should panic about? What is some of our advice when something like this happens for the typical runner?
Well, I mean, first, they say that death is the one thing all humans share. Well, injury is the equivalent that all runners share. You cannot get by with trying to improve as a runner without also having to deal with some injuries along the way. The question is how severe they are, whether it's just like a 1-day thing or it's a 1-year thing, and all the little aspects that go into healing from that. But I think the big thing to remember is that like running involves impact. You're not going to get through fully without breaking down a little bit sometimes, because the whole goal of training, when you apply stress, you have very minor breakdown that you build back stronger. Mm-hmm. So, if you're doing that process, eventually you're just going to go a step too far. And sometimes that step too far might be as simple as a little bit of inflammation on an ankle, or, maybe your shin hurts a little bit. And that's where the decision point happens. How are you going to treat that? How are you going to respond to that? So, I think one thing that's really important, just from a coach's perspective, seeing all these, like both some of the best runners in the world, but then also a lot of people that are starting running and everything in between, is that everyone goes through it. You don't see it on Instagram feeds very often, right. Where people are like, oh, I'm dealing with this shin issue right now, but I'm still going to post this photo from last week, or whatever. But it's something that everyone deals with. So don't think that like you're inferior or something is not sufficient about you. It's just a part of being a runner. And so accepting that and viewing it at the same level as training or whatever else is essential to being happy, but also reaching your potential.
It's funny that you even bring up like the social media side of things. That's that's a conversation I think we can get to probably in the middle of our podcast tonight, because I feel that kind of falls into the how do you deal with it while it's occurring. Do you have any tips or tricks for individuals to avoid injury? Because we talk a lot about core work and all these different strength exercises that you can do, and they will help you not get injured. But is there a foolproof plan? Is there any advice that you can give to some of our runners?
That's an awesome question. There is no magic, unfortunately. Like anything that says there is not being like 100% truthful, but they're probably trying to sell you. They're probably trying to sell you something. Is more.
I was going to say there's this product on Twitter that told me if I buy it, I would avoid injury.
Hey, I'm a running coach, so I'm telling you, same idea. But yeah, there's definitely ways that you can stack the odds in your favor, and I really view my role as a coach of conveying those and helping someone set up a system that gets them to that point. So, I'm just going to go through a few right now. I have a lot written down, but I'm just going to go through 3 to start. The first is just the intensity of your running. And that goes into volume. But basically, by going hard often, you're really opening yourself up to injury. And what a lot of people think is hard and easy isn't really calibrated. So learning to calibrate your easy over time so that it is a truly easy effort for your body is something that really prevents injury. And I would say that's the biggest one of all. The second is stress, full life stress. We always say the body doesn't know miles, it knows stress. So when you're comparing to, like, let's say a pro athlete that's doing 100 miles a week or even 60 miles a week, it's totally different than someone with 3 kids and that works, a busy job trying to do the same thing. And to really consider your full life situation, and like my athletes are probably I'm a broken record with, like, as soon as I see things getting busy, I'm like, we got to decrease, just because it's about stress, not mileage. And then the final one would be being really liberal with your rest days. Just like you can just sprinkle it on like salt, like you can tell time because I'm making that food reference. But if something comes up, rest preemptively. Don't stigmatize doing nothing, because doing nothing is where the magic happens, where adaptation happens, and by adapting, you're also preventing injury. So then there's a lot of other really small things, but really it's just about balancing training load with rest so that you can actually absorb it and you're not just like breaking down. Because basically, if you train really hard without, or even not even really hard, if you're training and not adapting to it, it's basically self-destruction. And so you want to avoid that point. Like, more is not better for almost anyone.
Great advice. I'm been watching the live chat room down here, and I know Kim has as well. There are a ton of questions. And I know I had a feeling we're going to get a lot tonight. So Kim is going to do her best to pull aside some that are relevant either to the conversation or that can be answered by David here immediately. Kim, what do you got so far?
Yeah, I think there's a couple right off the bat that are kind of relevant to the start of the show here. Nathaniel asked, David, what is your line that separates pain from injury?
Well, that's the toughest question of all. And I think you really have to start to know yourself. That's like let's say the difference between any, like, I'm trying to just thinking on the list. Amelia Boone is the best example to bring up because she's very open about this stuff publicly. I started coaching her in 2016, in like March of that year. She had or February that year, qualified for Western States right off the bat, got a golden ticket. And the first thing that jumps out about her, I mean, she's literally known as the queen of pain in the obstacle course racing world. She's just famous for being able to absorb that amount of pain. And as her coach, I dropped the ball a little bit in not understanding how that interacts with increasing running training. So her quad just had a little hurt a little bit, a muscle injury, just a little muscle pain that we all deal with since like December. And she thought it was nothing, trained through it until one day she's doing the final key long run before Western States and just gets a mile from the car and it's like it pops. And she found out that little muscle injury that she thought was nothing was actually a fully fractured femur straight through the middle.
Wow.
So that gets back to, like, most people, if that happened to me, I would have been crying 6 months before, maybe.
Right.
Like, I mean, because that had progressed to that point over time. So, in other words, it's really something you have to calibrate for yourself. And with that in mind, it is always good to err on the side of thinking something requires rest than pushing through it and thinking you're lying to yourself, like your brain is wrong or something. More rest will always be better in the long run when you're in doubt. The thing that I always say is 3 days off, absolutely nothing. Same with 6 days off. 3 weeks off is still not a big deal. Like, your body will come back pretty darn quickly from that. 3 months off starts to get pretty bad. So, for your long-term potential. And then, going out past that, you're really going to have to start rebuilding a lot. So the idea is you can take as many 3 days off as you need to stay healthy and to err on the side of, like, respecting what your body's telling you. And with that in mind, I mean, I'm a stickler for every day writing down exactly what you feel so that you can go back and track it over time. Like, even if you don't have a coach, writing down, like, okay, any injuries, anything I'm feeling right now. And then, I mean, you start to learn it. You can calibrate yourself almost like, I don't know, you're like an instrument or something, like you're tuning a guitar. So always err on the side of being safe.
I had no idea about Amelia. I know Amelia. We've had her on the show a number of times, but I didn't realize that it was a full like fracture through the bone, and that started to feel like a muscle. Like, it was just a small muscle injury to begin with. That's crazy.
It's why it took so long. And honestly, the biggest issue we've had in the last, and so the Amelia story is a very happy ending for those that don't know, and that she just finished 100K and top 5 at the Sean O'Brien 100K. Just last week from this injury that, honestly, this wasn't like a normal stress fracture. This was, one of those really horrifying ones. But the hardest part in building back was recalibrating what pain actually means for a normal person to Amelia. So, like, she shared her running logs actually online, and you can go back and look at that on her blog, where she was writing these things for me in her log. But I mean, we're both going back and you don't see my side of the conversation, but we're basically going back and forth trying to answer that question. Like, and what we ended up defaulting to was, okay, rest. Even if it's nothing, rest.
Right.
And that's allowed her to train healthily, run her highest mileage weeks ever, and then do really well at this race and set her up for the rest of the year.
It's interesting that you even mentioned just pain threshold. Obviously, Amelia, known as the Queen of Pain, we've talked about that on the show. Ultra runners, trail runners, even long distance road runners that have huge volumes each week. There is a high threshold for pain. There's things that you like, well, I'm going to train through this because I know I felt it before, or it's not as bad as it was this one time, and then it turned out to be this. And
or you just feel like it's a part of it.
This is a part of the training and the increase in volume. How do you know? How do you know when one thing could be a catalyst for something worse, or if it's just pain that you are experiencing because of high volume or increased mileage on a specific workout?
So 2 general rules. I mean, there's a lot of ways to get really narrow and specific with it, but first, if something hurts when you're walking, don't run. Like, it's not going to get better when you suddenly start going faster and putting down more impact. So if you're feeling it in everyday life and it's just clearly not, like, all good, don't be like, oh, it's gonna run, it's gonna get better. It's kind of like having a marriage that's struggling, being like, oh, let's have a kid and see if it gets better. Probably should be safe with that. The second is, if you start and, like, a little bit of discomfort gets worse as you run, stop running immediately. We always say that the walk of shame as a runner, like where you have to walk back to the car or whatever. I mean, it's a walk of pride for a runner. The people that are willing to do that are the ones that stay healthy. But conversely, if something loosens up, it might be okay to run through because clearly the impact is not making it worse. So that's kind of like where it gets back to an ankle twist being the constant example for trail runners, let's say, where, I mean, we twist our ankles all the time. You have to run on a sprained ankle sometimes, but you could have the worst case scenario where it's an avulsion fracture. But an avulsion fracture won't get better as you run. Right. So, that's kind of how to figure out that line.
Got it. Kim, let's get some more questions.
Yeah, Mike Lawson in the chat room has an interesting question. Mike asked, David, would heart rate training prevent overstress? It seems to have been working for me.
Yeah, definitely.
Thoughts on heart rate training?
Yeah, so basically any way you can learn to calibrate your effort levels with your actual physical exertion is helpful. So, for us as coaches, what we've really learned is that certain personalities absolutely need a heart rate monitor to start to understand how much they're actually putting out. So like a lot of the times people will put it on and it'll be so high and they'll be shocked. And it's no wonder then that you get injured, because if your body is exerting at that level all the time, you're releasing a ton of stress hormones like cortisol, you're running with worse form, your body's basically undergoing breakdown from a lot of different ends. So, so for different people, don't need that as much. The main thing, though, is just to use it at first to calibrate, to start to understand your body. Then you can kind of get away from that leash. I mean, there was one, Claire, who was on the show last year, Claire Gallagher. When I first started coaching her, we used a heart rate monitor constantly because, she had been feeling a little off, a lot of little nibbles, and now she never uses it because she kind of understands her body and how it's set up. But that's a great question, and it's one great way to do it.
Awesome. Let's get to one last question, then we'll move on to the next topic.
Sure. Let's see here. This is another great question from Nathaniel. Nathaniel asked, David, what is the most memorable injury that you've encountered, either personally or as a coach? And how did you approach the mental aspect of that injury?
Well, I mean, Amelia's injury that we just talked about. But basically every runner that has their own story. I'll go into mine just because I think it's kind of interesting and instructive on like getting the perspective. I had a way back before I even started coaching, right when I got into running, a pretty severe hip injury where they said I might not be running for 12 to 18 months. Wow. And like accepting that the stakes are higher when you run was my first step in really like being like, oh, maybe coaching is something that would be really helpful, because I'd always been thinking a lot about these issues, but that was the first time I'd reached the, we call it the FIM, which is the, like, what F stands for, it moment, where
I don't know what that.
I think it's fart.
It's
fart.
Yeah. Fart it moment. And
right, got it.
Where you like fully understand your own fragility for the first time. And that kind of makes you understand, okay, it's better to be cautious, play it safe. And I mean, I would say coaching, and I think a lot of what coaches do is all about setting that frame or helping an athlete set that own framework up for themselves so they can reach the same conclusions without getting like a severe injury. So that's a great question though.
Nice. We're going to move on to the next part of this same sort of topic, is what happens when someone does get injured. Just talking briefly about something that happened to me a couple of weeks ago. I've already been dealing with a couple of things with my right leg, like some the adductor stuff from last year, blah, blah, blah. On my inside of my shin, I started getting some inflammation, like tendonitis. It's something that I felt before, every once in a while, and it goes away after a certain amount of time. But it happened, and I'm like, oh my God, world's ending, or I'm going to have to take off 2 weeks, or I started panicking that I wouldn't be able to train for a race. So when this happens, David, what is the protocol? What is the series of events that should take place when self-evaluation must occur?
Well, I mean, first thing is trying to, like, get to a doctor preferably. I'm fortunate in that I have, like, my wife is a very soon-to-be doctor, so it gives a lot of understanding in that. But as a runner, you come across a lot of the same injuries and experiences a lot. So while Dr. Google should never be your doctor, it can actually be really helpful. Like, Dr. Google has definitely the School of Hard Knocks on his resume.
He's super cheap. He's very affordable.
Very, very affordable.
Takes all insurance, which is great.
May like steal your kidney without you looking. But but yeah, so understanding where the injury is, what it could be generally, and what that means for your recovery process. So let's say the shin. I mean, like, my athletes will know that when I see something in the shin, especially for a runner that's starting to build up, I'm like, immediately back off, because the tibial stress fracture is so common. Same goes for Achilles, where, Achilles can linger forever, or you can nip them in the bud in a few days. Meanwhile, knee, like, most knee situations are a little bit less, like, worrisome, because you don't get stress fractures in there much, though it can happen. So understanding where it happens and what that means is good. The second is, once you decide that it's something that you maybe shouldn't run through, or you're on the fence about it, if you're on the fence, start the rest process. And the rest process does not mean test it all the time when you're sitting at the computer and, like, pushing on it and
I was just getting ready to give you side eye.
Guilty. And I think everyone who's watching is like, what? That's what I like. How do you know when it's better? I test constantly.
So
don't do that.
I have heard about an athlete that got a stress fracture in their back from doing the hop test. If you've ever been to a doctor where you do the, like, hop on one leg to see if the injury's okay.
Right.
This athlete did the hop test so often that they turned another injury into a stress fracture, which is, I can't imagine how often that was. It must have been like jump roping practically, like double Dutch hop tests.
Right.
But
8,000 hop tests today. I think it's good.
Yeah, exactly. But the key is to actually let something rest. So the body is pretty it's a pretty miraculous thing how well it can heal from minor stresses. So before, almost everything in running is a stress injury. That's the main thing to remember. And so stress injuries are not like binary, like 0, totally healthy, 1, I'm injured now for 6 weeks. It really falls on a spectrum, and it spends a lot of time close to 0 before it starts getting up to 1, unless you have a pretty unique injury. So if you catch it early, like even something that can involve a few of the bone cells being a little bit deformed can heal more quickly than you might imagine. But so the key is, like, immediately being, okay, this will be 2 or 3 days off, and I'm not going to test it. I'm going, like, if you're comfortable with it, if your doctor says so, take some anti-inflammatories, do that sort of thing, and just let it be. Like, let your body recover. And the final big focus there is energy availability. So healing requires calories. Not just healing, avoiding injury in the first place. I think energy availability is one that I didn't talk before, but because it kind of is an umbrella on all of these. But if you're operating on a caloric deficit, your injury risk skyrockets in every type of way. Your body can't handle stress as much. Musculoskeletally, you're just at way higher risk. So really focusing on giving your body the stuff it needs to heal. I mean, both of you guys know that I'm all about the burger Sunday, or the vegetarian equivalent, where you, like, treat yourself and let your body, like, just get what it needs. So yeah, I mean, I think there's magic in the 3 days off. So my first instinct is always, if it's in a trouble spot, or if it's like something that's a little bit worrisome, just take 3 days off, take some anti-inflammatories, let it be, and you're probably going to be fine without it becoming something more severe.
And that's not going to set you back in your training.
Oh, absolutely not. So Coach Jack Daniels, one of the most legendary coaches in the history of the world, which actually sounds like I'm making a joke about, like, my coach is Jack Daniels, but it's actually his name. He has a chart that actually goes through the specific details of fitness. Probably many of the people in the audience have heard of VDOT, the metric he uses to calibrate paces. And 3 days or less off, 5 days or less off, and you hop right back at 100% VDOT. And that's with tons of studies. So you don't want to take 5 days off every week, because then, like, you're running 2 days a week. But doing it pretty when you have to, like once a month, which for some athletes it is, especially as people are starting running where you're at higher risk.
Right.
It's totally fine. And not only that, it's like, think of it as a chance to adapt. Like your body absorbs the past training. You build back carefully. You don't go right into workouts. But, time off is an opportunity, not a curse.
Awesome. Again, we are live. We've had a number of questions pop through the chat room. Kim, what do we got?
Yeah, a question from Scott in the chat room. David, how do you deal with a client that will not take your advice to avoid the stress and take breaks?
Yeah, as a coach, and you probably deal with, you do deal with athletes of all levels. How do you deal with them?
So my athletes that are on the chat room probably know that the one place where I am a royal jerk is in like requirement of taking time off, and like weekly rest day is absolutely non-negotiable. Like every pro on the team, even that's doing like crazy stuff, takes a day off every week. Which builds in, if you think about a day off a week, it builds in 7.5 weeks of rest in the year right there. Mm-hmm. But if someone absolutely says no to rest, like I make it clear that like that's unacceptable from, basically I view that as helping them be masochistic. Like you're buying into whatever their addiction is, and that's not my role. Like it's to support them. So there are some funny stories of me like being like putting my foot down and saying for me, like for me, mean means like no exclamation points, but really using a lot of periods and just being really stern.
So on that topic, there's been a number of questions asking, how do you feel about run streaks?
I believe the original question was run steaks.
But
they misspelled
it actually is run steaks.
It's run steaks, but obviously they meant run streaks.
Yeah, there's been a few people asking about run streaks. And one person asking about run steaks.
Well, run steaks are amazing, and you should just have as many run steaks as you can possibly have. But run streaks, I am extremely so I'm gonna couch this in that a lot of people do run streaks for reasons that go beyond running. Like they'll do it as a tribute to. There's one athlete that I coach right now who does it as a tribute to his mom, and it's really and so we figured out where he'll do like 2 miles twice a week sometimes, and that's like the slight caveat. But if someone's doing a run streak for other reasons, like I don't know, ego, or there are some that like maybe it's motivation, like not having the option helps. I just think it's really starting to venture into like, why are you doing running in the first place? Like if you need that as to make you love it. So I think run streaks can work for a person that is extremely talented when it comes to durability. And make no mistake, durability is a talent. Like people often think talent just means the ability to run up the hill outside, your backyard really fast and get your VO2 max high. But staying healthy is just as much a talent. You can work on it just like you can VO2 max, but some people can do anything to their bodies and they'll be mostly okay. And other people have to be a lot more careful. Embodied on some, there's a reason that some of the pros I coach will be doing 110 miles a week and some will be doing 40 and getting great results both ways. But that's because, there's a lot of factors that go into that.
Right.
So, for a person that has that super talent, that's great. For people that don't, like, I think it's a little bit masochistic at times. That being said, any choice someone makes that's fulfilling in their, worldview, fully support, as long as it doesn't involve like killing puppies or something.
Yes, none of that, please. One question that I wanted to present, or a scenario, I guess, is one that I feel is fairly common. I read about it, I hear about it a lot, and this is someone who's training for an event. It could be their first distance, first 100K, first 100-miler, maybe first marathon, something like that. And an injury or something starts squeaking in about a month out, maybe 6 weeks even, in that kind of prime time when your mind is focused on reaching these goals, probably a distance goal, like a training goal to be ready for the event before the taper. What is the advice for someone who maybe encounters something small or something large in that time frame?
Yeah, I think it all gets back to how you frame races and what you're building to in the first place. So, I really emphasize that the goal is not the result of the race. It's the experience of the race. So if you don't get to the start line, you're depriving yourself of the whole experience. So the goal, so instead of framing, I want to get to the finish line as fast as I can, or I want to get to the finish line as well, framing is like, if I get to the start line, I've already won, and the race itself is the celebration. So, you know, and there's a lot of great stories. I actually, of one that's on the tip of my tongue. So speaking of the Sean O'Brien races, there was the Sean O'Brien 50 mile. And I have an athlete named Ellen Kenny, who some people that are on might know. And she is a very busy lawyer, and like a week and a half out, she has had a history of stress fractures. She had pain appear very suddenly in her shin. And like, I didn't think it was a stress fracture based on the stuff that Megan was telling me and that I've had experience with. But, you know, it's like, look, we got to be careful. She took a full week off, 10 days out, full week off, ran the 3 days, and then figured out got an MRI actually, and figured out it was fine as expected. Ran for 3 days real short, and then finished second at Sean O'Brien, right behind Nikki Kimball at the 50 mile, right behind Nikki Kimball. Wow. So the lesson there is, one, you don't lose much fitness, but two, like, she wouldn't have had that experience had she tried to run through it, because she never would have made the start line in the first place. So, you know, be aware as you go, but don't be afraid of taking time off even right before. I mean, especially with ultras, like what we're doing here does not require you to be at your absolute peak of speed. Like resting is actually a very productive thing for a lot of people. I mean, honestly, I mean, that might have been the perfect thing for Ellen. Who knows what the alternative universe is, whether if she trained right through. So, you know, be willing to take time off. I would say don't take a full month off and then race. But if you have to take a couple weeks off, like, you can still do it as long as you work back to the consistency before the race.
Nice. Great advice. And I don't think there'll be someone watching this that doesn't pull something out of that. I think that's fantastic. And a scenario that I encounter all the time. A lot of people asking, oh, I'm injured and it's X amount of weeks until race day. What do I do? And I'm like, I don't know. I wouldn't know what to tell you.
Well, and just less is more. Like, I think everyone thinks that you need to do a ton to reach your potential. And over time, like, the cumulative stress does matter over the course of many years. In a single training cycle, the body doesn't really work like that. The body is remembering what you've done for years. You're not going to make it up in that amount of time. And a good like, just thinking about names that everyone knows. So everyone probably assumes Claire Gallagher does 1 million miles per week. She does 50. She did like 52 miles a week, like before North Face and CCC, where she finished second at North Face and first at CCC. Like, that's because that works for her. She lives a pretty stressful life because she's like a superhuman, like, that does everything and helps everyone. So, you know, for her that works. And Kat Bradley, before Western States last year in the build, took a full week off for an injury. Just her toe hurt a little, and we were scared because she had increased volume. Took a full week off, then goes and wins Western States. So, you know, you don't always have to exceed what you've done in the past to have results that exceed what you've done in the past, or at least experiences that exceed them.
Awesome. Go for it, Kim.
Yeah, a question from Stephanie in the chat room. David, how do you keep your mind from going crazy or getting depressed when dealing with a more severe injury?
What's up, Stephanie?
Yeah, so Stephanie, so sorry if you've dealt with something like that. I mean, I think this is the honestly the hardest part, is where you reach a point where you realize you have a severe injury. A lot of people, it's like an MRI read or something like that, and you're staring into the abyss of a certain amount of time off. So, I mean, I think the first thing to do is something you can do when you're healthy too. It's to try to reframe as much as you can how you think about running. And I think Ginger Runner Live is actually so amazing for this. It's everyone that runs, every runner is a part of your team. So that when you're injured, it's not that you're out, you can't do anything. It's that you're just kind of shifting your focus to your teammates. And so you can root for others, and your ego doesn't play as big of a role, because that's like really hard. It's to be like, I am not a part of all these experiences. But that's a small one relative to like the emotional difficulty of it. And there, I mean, I would say the key, just like anything in life when it comes to that, is to talk about it with people that you trust. I mean, honestly, therapists are great for this, but significant others, friends, be open about like what you're going through mentally, and that it's not easy, because every runner will understand that, even if they seem real tough. Like, I see behind the scenes, and trust me, people are do not take these things lightly. They're not really causes for laughing for that many people. And if they are causes for laughing, it's like in a maniacal Joker type way from Batman. Then the other thing is start to think about how this is going to make you better. It seems really difficult to understand, but injuries are often, you can almost always trace the creation of a star athlete or a breakthrough to some point, some obstacle point. It's kind of like evolution. So in evolution, they'll say that the biggest periods of evolution in world history all happen when there becomes a bottleneck. When like whether it's an asteroid or for humans, there was like all of human population went down to a very small number. And the reason that is like it causes everything speeds up. And so with your body, injuries go that same way. I talked about my hip. That preceded like a national championship and making a couple US teams when I had never showed that before. And so many athletes are the same way. So, the injury itself is an opportunity. Then you can do the things to make it so that you're more indestructible for the future. You can do mobility stuff like Jane Fonda style exercises for almost anything.
Love those.
Yes, exactly. Most injuries you can cross train through, not all. If you can't cross train, it's a little bit more complicated. But cross training is a great chance to actually get stronger and come back faster than ever. And then, control the little things in your life and make sure that you're more mindful of, you start meditating, you do other things where you can channel your, every runner has a certain amount of structure in their lives, and you can start channeling that into ways that will make you a better runner and person when you're healthy. Because at the end of the day, almost every injury, unless you're breaking your femur clean across, like most injuries are just a couple months at most. And when you look back on the context of a life, or especially the context of a runner's life, it's so small beans. I know that it's so hard. I mean, it's impossible for me to even think about when I'm injured. But, as a coach, you see so many athletes zoomed out from such a perspective. And, I've been coaching people now for 4 years, let's say, and seeing them go through everything, like, everything in their lives, everything imaginable from, getting married to having kids to getting injured. And injuries are like pretty, they're minor blips on the radar, even though they feel like massive disturbances in your like personal force at the moment.
I love that. I love that last bit of advice. I'm sitting here just like, yes, nodding my head, yes.
It's like being in a church and you're like, preach.
Let's get to a couple more live questions before we wrap the show, because there were just so many questions. I will say that a number of those questions might revolve around nutrition. A lot of people asking, how does nutrition play a role in X injury, plantar fasciitis, and other things like that? Do you go down the road of nutrition plays a large part of injury prevention, or is it you just eat more? Like what's your advice on
well,
on that?
I'll provide the caveat to start that nutrition often ventures into like a belief system. It's almost like talking about religion or politics. And
Preach.
So yeah, exactly. So just know that I don't mean to offend anyone or say anything wrong. I mean, nutrition is one of those fields that like there are different right answers for everyone, and certain things work for everyone. But the general things we found, and I think most people would agree with nutrition, is first, getting enough is important. If you are operating in negative energy availability, you're opening yourself up for injuries. You're not going to heal as fast, all that other stuff. Then from a broader point of view, like the protein is important as much as like you'll often hear people say you don't actually need much protein. Like you can get by on like 20 grams a day. We found across people, maybe that's true if you've grown up in an environment where you don't like, if you grew up in that way, but it seems that for most runners that grew up in Western society, some amount of protein, like a moderate focus on getting enough protein does help the body rebuild. And there's some studies on that show protein does repair, skeletal muscle fiber and all this other good stuff. But that doesn't mean like you have to pound whey protein shakes. It just means that a lot of runners will often default to extremely low protein, carb heavy diets. And that probably isn't the best way to stay healthy for healthy in terms of injuries, health in terms of other stuff outside of my pay grade. But yeah, so fat and protein are your friends, and not to shy away from that stuff. And then beyond that, just doing like, I honestly think my big nutrition philosophy is that not withholding stuff from yourself is usually the most healthy thing for your brain. And what's healthy for your brain is healthy for your body. So we haven't talked about the mind body connection so much, but I have some crazy stories from athletes of just how real the mind body connection is. I mean, no names, but there's some, for example, where I will hear about an injury constantly. And then they'll go to a doctor or go to an MRI, and then it'll be clear, and the injury completely goes away like that. And usually that coincides with some external stress outside of running or related to running, maybe a race is on the calendar, for example, psychosomatic pain, things like that. So to be really aware of how your brain and your body interact and how that varies for each person.
I love it. That's fantastic. Let's get to a couple more live questions, and then we'll let David go. We'll move actually into the post show with Patreon supporters, and David can answer more additional questions there. What you got, Kim?
Let's see here. What do I got?
I know you pulled a bunch aside. You're scrolling through like 10 different questions.
There was a question earlier, and it actually came from a couple different people. The one that I did pull was from Yanman53. Just wanting clarification in regards to when you were talking earlier about a rest day or one rest day per week. Are you talking like a complete rest day, or you're talking a rest day that includes cross training, for example?
Oh man, good full slaw. No, so the general way we approach rest days is that a rest day is like a full day to let your body just decompress. And like, if you're a sponge that's been absorbing water all week, it's just the day that you kind of just wring yourself out. So there's no magic to that. I mean, some people need to be active every day, or they like go crazy and start like pulling out their hair. But I mean, I think there is, over time, taking consistent full rest days where you can, like, I love walking, things like that. Nothing where your heart rate gets high, nothing that involves any pounding for sure. So you can bike maybe if you really need it. But also there's no magic to a week. It can be every 10 days. It can be every 5 days. Like your body doesn't really understand why we split things up like that based on the way the stars move and stuff. But, like really give your body time to fully just chill. Sometimes it can be really productive. You can actually, and one warning about that is you may feel kind of like crappy the next day sometimes. That's okay. Like that's actually a good thing. That's your body just getting back into gear. That's why, like, my athletes all know that usually there'll never be a workout after a rest day or a race. It's always like it's 2 days after, so that your body can get back into the swing of things. But embrace the rest. Like, the body really is made to kind of chill sometimes, especially for runners that are putting a lot of stress on it.
Rest day brags. Give a shout out here to Casey Lichtai is in the chat room. Casey is a guest of Ginger Runner Live, a champion runner, Western States winner, and she just ran UTMB last year, but we had her on the show after that race, and then underwent a giant injury.
Yes.
So Casey's currently in her I'm just reading here, 16 weeks. She's on week 16. I'm starting to run again, almost ready to run 100% body weight and outside. So this is a championship first place runner, has won multiple races, one of the kindest humans that had a terrible injury and has taken her out of her run game for a long time. And it's great, Casey, to hear that you are testament that time off, patience can get you back to running. Even the best in the world still undergo. And like our I guess tonight David Roche was talking about Amelia Boone and Claire Gallagher and people who train at the top level of the sport still deal with things from time to time. And it's important to know you're not alone.
Not only is Casey one of the best runners in the world, but she's also, a professional in this field, in injury prevention and managing the body. Not sure what exactly she does, but she is extremely, like, the way she dealt with it, and it was really open about the emotional aspect of it too. I thought was so productive for so many people. I mean, I referred so many athletes that were dealing with things to her and to her, her blog and her Twitter and her Instagram and things, just because, like, she showed it on her sleeve and showed it not just as an elite athlete that like has pretty high stakes with all this, but as someone who very openly loves the process of it, like in a pure way. Plus, is like is like has a degree and works at this as in a professional manner that goes beyond just getting some money to run. And so I mean, I think that example is probably one of the cooler ones that we've seen. And I mean, I bet that Casey comes back and who knows how long. You never know exactly how the body reacts. It's not always linear, but I for one will have a lot of popcorn ready for Casey's.
No doubt. Yeah, whatever event, Casey, that you decide to come back to, obviously the body is going to tell you more than anything, but whatever event it is and whenever it is, my money's on you. Like there's no doubt. Putting it all down on Casey.
Well, unless I'm running the same event, right?
Well, yeah, unless it's Kim, and then it's all the money on
Casey.
On Casey. But it's awesome, Casey, to see you drop by, and of course our guest tonight, David Roche. It was awesome to have you on the show, just dropping knowledge. Those of you who are watching live, or maybe watching the archive version, or even listening to the podcast version, which I will be updating very soon now that we have good audio. This was one of those episodes that I know that I'll be going back and listening to. Someone, myself, who deals with various little injuries, little things, because I'm not an elite runner. I never claimed to be. I'm a bit heavier, and when I tend to run long distances, my aches and pains, they all tend to jump up. And it's important for me to listen to my body and not push it beyond the point of like breaking it. There's that fine line, and David's been such a great help in me getting to that fine line and pulling back, and then pushing a little bit beyond it and pulling back, and it's been really helpful.
And also learning to be okay with taking days off.
It's the hardest thing, and I think that what we can take away from this show is maybe that it's okay. It's okay that you can take a day off. You can take 3 days off, and I believe David, you said 3 to 6 days, and you're totally fine.
And probably everyone does it, and you just don't see about it. You don't see it very often talked about. But like behind the scenes, I get to see the dirty, ugly details of it all, of people's running lives. And people's running lives are a lot less clean than they seem in terms of like injuries and stresses and love of themselves, self-acceptance, even, which is an intellectual injury in some ways. Sure. And so basically whatever you feel, like you are not alone, and not only are you not alone, you probably are like have a whole crew behind you. The only one thing I would add before we end is that there are proactive things that I didn't talk about that you can do to reduce your injury risk. The mobility and strength work, you don't really need to overdo that stuff, but basically strong hips and core really can make a difference. The Myrtle routine, MYRTL, you can Google that if you're on here, and that's an amazing, quick, easy routine that was developed by Coach Jay Johnson, works really well. The last thing is like
people are also currently watching your 5-minute running warm-up lunge matrix right now. I have cut to that. It's this incredible lunge routine that David has up on his YouTube channel. Highly recommend you watch it. It's just something really quick that you do right before every run, and it's a great little strength builder for the legs and core and everything.
Basically,
right?
All this. Not too many people have an excess of time that they're just like willing to have to throw at all this stuff. So the key is working it into your life in a way that really works. So if you have tons of time, honestly, like the more the better. But for most people, finding a 5 minute routine that works for you, but before and after runs, is great. You can just do it like rinse and repeat, and you'll adapt to it. You'll get way strong, and you'll do that. But then the last little thing is like foam rolling and massage and that sort of thing. Like, I mean, the big benefit of being in a marriage is having someone that can give you massages on your lower legs. But you get a foam roller for almost everyone. Like usually that can help prevent some very preventable soft tissue injuries, and it also feels really good after a while. And dogs really like it, kids really like it. So. Do that.
Awesome.
I like watching your foam rolling videos because you talk about like not being the most coordinated person, and Ethan had a really good laugh at me the other
Multiple
night.
times, actually.
As I was like dead bugged on my back, and he's like, "What's wrong?" I was like, "I just fell off the foam roller."
It's true. So, you've fallen off the foam roller now a handful of times.
I'm very graceful.
Like every once in a while, I'll just hear from the living room. ow. I'm like, oh no, Kim, what happened? I fell off the foam roller. I'm like, you're going to get more injured falling off the foam roller than you are from the weekly mileages and stuff. It's funny. Things like this happen all the time. Yeah. Being married is great. It's so fun. David Roche, seriously, you were you always are a fantastic guest. Tonight, I feel like, man, we just always get these great knowledge bombs dropped on the show.
I also feel like this could be like a 6-hour show.
Yeah, I mean, I could sit and just pick David's brain. And I know everyone who's watching live there's still a number of questions that didn't get answered. So what we're going to do is we're going to hold on to David just a little bit longer for the post show. So if you are a Patreon supporter, we'll see you in just a couple of minutes. If you would like to join our post shows every single Monday with our guest tonight, we'll have David. You can do so by just going to patreon.com/The Ginger Runner. It's for as little as $1 a month. You get access to all of the post shows and stuff like that with our guests. It's super easy and it helps the show. It basically helps Kim and I keep the lights on, the mics hot, the mics new, which is fantastic. So thank you, Patreon supporters. So consider that if you have not already. Now, David, where can people find you on social media? Where can they ask those residual questions? Where can they email you about, I think you're full, but where can they email you about possibly coaching in the future, stuff like that?
Oh, yeah. So basically, you can email me anytime about anything, and I'll try to help with even questions. So it's all on our website, swaprunning.com, SWAP running.com. And then you can find me every other social media outlet, and that's probably not too hard. You can find my dog places too. Really.
Yes, they're going to love it. We are big dog lovers here at Ginger Runner Live.
Oh.
There we go.
There she is.
She doesn't like this at all. But yeah, basically, just know that I view my role in this community as just trying to support people as much as possible, and even if it's not through coaching or you can't pay or whatever, just shoot me questions and I'll try to help.
And I will say that there's been a number of Ginger Runner community members, viewers of the show, Patreon supporters that have gotten advice and expertise from David. So he is doing great things for not only this community, but the running community in general. So if you have any residual questions or you want more information on David, his services, or any of that kind of stuff, definitely go check out the website. And
David's wife, Megan, as well.
Yep, absolutely.
Tons of knowledge.
She didn't drop on. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, we have a book coming out next year, so that's not. There's nothing to get, but
I can't wait.
Yeah.
It's a new Harry Potter book. It has nothing to do with running, but
it's actually Dumbledore fan fiction, and you're gonna like it, I think. But yeah, that's just something to put on the back burner in case you ever see anything about it.
It's Dumbledore and Gandalf's story.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that's it.
I think it's cross genres. It's gonna be amazing.
I can't wait.
But no, it's called the Happy Runner Project, and hopefully it is bearable. I'm at the stage of writing where I just cannot stand my own writing, so we'll get it to a good final position. So yeah.
Awesome. Can't wait. That's fantastic. Thank you, everyone, for watching live. Ginger Runner Live, episode number 197 is now coming to a close. We have a couple more episodes, and Trayson, of course. Get out there, train hard, race harder, and part of the hardest. That's one thing that I really love about this community is that everyone embraces everyone, all abilities, all shapes, all sizes, and really embraces the work, the training, and the celebration with all your victories. A big shout out to David, of course, for tonight's show and everyone watching live. We'll see you guys in just a couple of minutes if you are a Patreon supporter. So head on over to patreon.com/thegingerrunner. It's already been posted. The post show's ready to go. David will be joining us for that. It'll be about 10-15 minutes, and we'll just rapid fire through questions and stuff. I think that's pretty much it. If you are a regular viewer of the channel and have not subscribed, consider it. We are almost at 100,000 subscribers. I believe we are about 1,000 short, maybe around 1,100 subscribers short of 100,000. So we're almost there. And I'll mention it tonight, but I have a running goal that will occur when we reach 100,000. I'm afraid to say it because it's something that I have not done in a couple of years, but it's a big one, and it's something that should be really fun. And David's been helping me get there, and it's gonna be great. So once we get to 100,000, I'll make that big announcement.
Yep,
we're almost there.
Let's hope it's not in the dead of winter.
Yeah, let's hope that. That would be.
It's shirtless.
Thanks, Kim, for spoiling everything. No one will want to subscribe if it's anything me shirtless. I would unsubscribe at that point.
I'll write some fan fiction about that.
There we go. Now we're talking. That's a book I'd buy. That's not true. I wouldn't buy it. That's it for tonight's show. Everybody, we'll see you in the post show. Subscribe, and we'll see you next Monday for another Ginger Runner Live. Kim, am I forgetting anything?
I don't think so. I think that's it.
We're getting up there. All right, guys. We'll see you next week. Bye.
Bye.
Ginger Runner.